Say, for instance, you find out that your brother got accepted into medical school, and you also find out a recent friend of yours, and you also find out that your friend graduated and got a job at Google as a software engineer. And lastly, because college application seasons are about done, you also find out that your sister secured a full ride to Harvard. You in that circumstance would probably ask yourself, what have I done deserving of praise? Or what have I done deserving to be on the highlight for the week? Similar questions pop up in our minds way more often than they should. And if we go into 2025 with this continuous cycle of comparison, not only will we be burnt out by how much there is left to compare, but then we won't be allocating time to things that make us productive. And so we spend all of our time contemplating on how we want to look like someone or how we want to be like someone else. There's a ton of videos out there, but in this video, I want to highlight 3 main ways you can stay productive in 2025. And that just starts by you not comparing yourself to others, you being flexible with your goals, and you staying consistent with those goals, even when you don't see progress. I've always compared myself with others, and I'll just highlight how my 2024 went with comparison, right? I used to always see people living good, living lavish, and looking good, and so much to the point where I would ask myself, what can I do to get to that level, or just what was I doing wrong? And I had to learn the hard way that comparing myself with others wasn't even sustainable long term, and it only brought me down when it came to accomplishing things that I originally set for myself. If anything, I had to learn the hard way that comparing myself wasn't even sustainable long term, especially as this mindset caused me some self-induced toxicity to the point where I was overly toxic towards myself if I didn't accomplish something the way this person did it, or if I didn't look as good or fashionable as this other individual. And with that, my mind was clouded. My goals were scrambled up simply because I constantly compared things like my grades, my lifestyle, financial status to that of others. It wasn't until I completed the year and realized how much I never really accomplished because I was always so focused on what everyone else was doing. See, when I was focused on everyone else's journey, everyone else's milestones and accomplishments, I didn't really have the time to think about mine. And so this led to me hopping from one thing to another thing to the next thing and not really allocating time to give 100% to what I had originally set my mind to. Instead, I was giving maybe 20% here, 40% here, and maybe 1% in this other area, which is kind of ineffective when accomplishing anything. The one thing I've come out of this realizing is that it's not a matter of what people do or how much they do it or how well they do it, but rather what I started focusing on is on my passions and how I could improve on my craft. If someone is doing something, that doesn't necessarily mean you should hop onto it and start doing it as well. Because then, are you really doing it for you, or are you doing it because it looks good when that other person does it? When it comes to flexibility, there's a lot of people out there who crash out if they completed their goal 99% of the way and that last remaining 1% wasn't accomplished. Sorry to say, but I'm one of them. I'm one of those people. I've always been, and I'm still working on that. The point I'm trying to make here is that when you set your mind to do something, always keep in mind that something may go wrong, that unexpected circumstances may occur. What we all fail to do, and what I've failed to do multiple times, is to include coping mechanisms when my life doesn't go as I planned, or when something unexpected just happens and throws me off. And so when I don't have a coping mechanism, I get overly frustrated, I get grumpy, I get angry, and just overwhelmed by everything that's happening then because I didn't plan for that. So then, after being thrown off, I would be even more harder on myself and then being overly toxic. I used to think that if I was hard on myself 24/7, then I would accomplish anything I set my mind to. And in fact, I used to think that taking breaks was a waste of valuable time that I could be using to accomplish something. And I often felt incompetent when I didn't accomplish a specific task within a specific time frame. Not only did this mentality prevent me from reaching maximum productivity, I also missed out on the entire process of learning, for instance, learning something I was passionate about and just enjoying the entire experience of life itself. It wasn't until recently when I started including small breaks into my study sessions before I got back into it. I could maybe do some push-ups, stretch, just get up, stand up, reset, and come back into it. Now I'm still kind of getting used to doing this method of having breaks and giving myself some grace and being flexible. Productivity is not something that you must stay all 6 or 7 hours locked in for, because I bet you that is not effective at all. What's more effective is if you do maybe 2 hours of a certain task, 10 to 15 minutes of a break, and you come back in doing another 2 hours. In that time frame, in that time you spent taking a break, you've actually given your brain some space to breathe, some time to get re-energized. When you come back, you can lock in a lot better with more concentration and focus on the task at hand. One of the famous ones is the Pomodoro technique. You do about 40 or so minutes intense, and then about 5 to 10 minutes of a break. Just any amount of time dedicated to breaks only, and that can be however much you want it to be, depending on the task at hand. With this one, there are so many ways you can go wrong with it, because it's just one of those things where we feel as though giving ourselves grace and giving ourselves flexibility means procrastination. No, it doesn't. What I mean by this is, if you say you're going to do something today and then you don't do it, and you push it on for the next day, with your reasoning being that you're giving yourself some grace and being flexible with yourself, I can understand it. I can take that. However, when it becomes a continuous thing, then you're just procrastinating and you're just pushing things off. Now, that doesn't help anyone. When you perform a task, even being 20% below those expectations can cause a lot of us to crash out. What flexibility looks like is when you don't crash out and you're satisfied with that because you know you gave it your all. Another important factor to staying consistent in 2025 is staying consistent with your endeavors, even when you don't see progress. I'm sure, just like me, you've been in multiple circumstances where you feel so motivated to do something, and then maybe after 1 or 2 days, you just stop. So maybe after a couple days of feeling motivated to do something, that motivation decreases, and without even knowing it, we just stop. Sometimes we don't even know why we stopped. Some people gradually fade away before stopping. What most people fail to do when they stop doing that thing is reflecting as to why they even started doing that activity in the first place. And that takes us all the way back to my last video where I touched upon being specific about your goals. I'm going to admit, consistency is something I've personally struggled with, and something that as humans we're naturally bound to struggle with this. The reason being that consistency requires us to be intentional and disciplined in our journey of doing something. And our brains are naturally wired to hate any feeling of discomfort or anything that requires work. And so then when we try to be intentional about doing something and staying consistent, that makes it something out of our comfort zone and something our brain is not used to. Although there's a lot more to discuss about consistency and discipline, for this video, I want to highlight how when you stop comparing yourself to others, and when you start being more kind to yourself and being flexible with your goals, this makes it just a little bit more easier to maintain consistency. I don't know if you've noticed, but think of a time when you've wanted to accomplish something for your personal benefit or for your personal enrichment. Think about what exactly went through your mind when you came up with this. Maybe it was a phone or an iPad you really wanted before the start of a new school year. When you decided you wanted that thing, you were probably 10 times more likely to put in the work for it. That right there is a form of intrinsic motivation, which is when you're driven by your internal desires and not by comparing yourself to someone else or what someone else has. With intrinsic motivation, you realize yourself putting in the time, work, and effort to attain these things for genuine reasons. Flexibility can also help you stay consistent in the sense that when you fall short or make a mistake, you being flexible with yourself kind of ingrains that mistake in your brain and makes you more driven to perform that task a lot better the next time you attempt it. Now, those aren't the only ways you can stay productive in 2025. And as we're all embarking on this journey of productivity in 2025, just let me know in the comments of more ways you feel like we all can achieve maximum productivity in 2025.